Well, joining us now to help us understand what Somaliland is hoping to gain from this strategy is Saeed Ibrahim, editor of the Somaliland Chronicle. So, Somaliland is essentially saying here, look at what Djibouti has done. But how realistic is it for Berbera to become another major hub for foreign military bases and international trade?
Well, this is Djibouti's playbook, but I believe Somaliland, in terms of sheer land mass alone, Somaliland can actually do this 10 times over. And those foreign militaries won't actually even be seeing each other, unlike the case is actually in Djibouti. So basically, the idea is, Djibouti right now hosts five major military, bases, including the United States and China. But at the same time, there is a massive opportunity, not only for Somaliland, but for, say, the United States, to actually shift a little bit to the east in Somaliland. And the reason being, at the beginning, when Houthis started, attacking ships in the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, Djibouti actually barred the United States from using Camp Lemonnier, their military base that they actually have, to support operations against the Houthis. And at the time, the Djibouti's foreign minister basically called this, a relief for the Palestinians, basically when he was describing what the Houthis were doing. So for that reason alone, I think Somaliland is a lot more viable than Djibouti can ever be, even though they have actually perfected, and this is one of their biggest sort of GDP in terms of what they actually sell to the world.
Right. But of course, opening the door to U.S. and Israeli military facilities is not something that is going to be welcomed by certain countries in the region. Particularly, we know, the Houthis in Yemen they've been attacking Israel more specifically in recent months as this, Middle East war rages on. So is there concern on the part of those living in Somaliland that there could be repercussions? And, what could those threats actually look like?
There's always a concern, but at the same time, the concerns seem to be really amplified when it comes to Somaliland, as if, the people in Somaliland don't actually have an agency. Now, obviously, every opportunity comes with a level of risk. But again, in my estimation, as just a mere reporter, I would say, Djibouti doesn't have that problem. Bahrain and many of the other Middle Eastern countries, including Saudi Arabia, that are hosting massive military bases for the United States, don't have these concerns, even though, yes, they are at the receiving end of, not Houthis, but Iranian missiles. So, every opportunity brings a level of risk, and I think the risk is baked in to the ratio. So I think we're going to be fine.
All right. Well, I think there is kind of another major question here. Last week, we spoke with Ethiopia's ambassador to Israel, who said that Addis Ababa is also very interested in this Berbera port as well. So do you think that this could ultimately be used to gain recognition from Somaliland's neighbors as well?
So Ethiopia, just stepping back a little bit, I think just before President Erro took over, the former president and the Ethiopian prime minister signed a memorandum of understanding. And the basic idea of it was that Ethiopia will recognize Somaliland in return for, some kind of a naval base and, a commercial port. Unfortunately, that deal actually fell apart. So, yes, as far as Ethiopia is concerned, a country of 120, plus million, landlocked, and their only, sort of choices at the moment are Djibouti or Somaliland, which actually Somaliland is a lot closer. So, actually one of the things that Somaliland, as a leverage and is trying to kind of sell the world and say, recognize us, and in return, we'll give you all of these, different facilities from national security to international trade, is an effective way of actually going about it. So, hopefully there will be takers. But the other important thing that's actually at play here is Somaliland has actually said no to China. That's very important to note. So even though Somaliland is actually offering, or kind of inviting the world to come open military bases, one of those notably absent will be China, which again is not the case in Djibouti, where they actually maintain their only foreign military base. So, from that point alone, I think Somaliland, can actually take the Djibouti formula and perfect it and actually, contribute to the world peace in a much more efficient way.
The final question that I wanted to ask, from where you're sitting, who do you expect to recognize Somaliland next?
Well, the hope was always those that not only know the realities on the ground, but they've actually invested in it and put their sort of money where their mouth is, and that would be the United Arab Emirates, right? Again, the better port that everybody's looking at with all of its sort of modern amenities is invested by the United Arab Emirates almost a decade before people were talking about Somaliland. So them, actually having first mover advantage that will be the hope, depending on how things are looking. So far, that hasn't materialized. At the same time, Ethiopia, which almost kind of stepped onto that plate, but last minute kerfuffle that actually Turkey, Djibouti, and many others kind of intervened and kind of twisted the prime minister's arm to kind of step away from that, pulling that trigger. So I mean, there's a lot of suitors. But I really do think the Somaliland right now, for decades, it was trying to sell the world we're peaceful, we're democratic. But now it looks like there's a shift in gears where basically we're saying, this is what we can offer you in return. So I think this is a much more effective foreign policy engagement than we are a democracy. Because again, what you do for yourself, nobody cares. What you can offer others, right? If you can actually have your interests kind of converge, that's a much more strategic posture.
All right, Saeed, as per usual, very fascinating to have you with us. Thank you for that breakdown.